week that Mark had a high fever. Uncle Scott set him a small box for trout flies. Mark was thrilled to have his uncle's favorite fly box. And what's more, it brought back memories of his first fishing trip. Last summer, Uncle Scott had taken him to a secret place on a sparkling river. And Mark had hooked a rainbow trout with a fly. How the little fish had jumped. More than anything else, Mark wanted to show his catch to his mother and father. But the fish got away and he never caught another. Better luck next time, Uncle Scott said. When Mark opened the box, he was startled by a cloud of mayflies that rose up from it. As the flies fluttered out the window, he looked outside and rubbed his eyes in wonder. The whole neighborhood had disappeared. A river flowed where the street had been, and a forest spread out as far as he could see. Then he noticed the mayflies hovering over the water, and shiny fish began to leap up after them. Mark rushed outside. He saw a rowboat bobbing in the shallow water. "I wonder whose it is," he whispered. He looked all around but saw no one. But the mayflies had moved down the river, with the leaping fish after them. "Well, I'm going to borrow this, just for a little while," he said, and he got into the boat. As Mark drifted around the first bend in the river, he saw a lone fisherman below him. Then, quite near Mark, a fish leapt out of the water, almost splashing him. It was the largest trout he had ever seen. It had a hook in its mouth. "How about that, Mark?" shouted the fisherman. "Uncle Scott," Mark cried. "What are you doing here?" "Funny you should ask," said Uncle, reeling in the fish. "I was about to ask you what you were doing in my boat." "This is your boat?" said Mark. Uncle nodded. "Well, I'm glad to see you're feeling better. So, did you like the box I sent you?" "Oh, yes, thank you very much. But you know what? All the flies flew away. I mean, they were real flies." "What magic," Uncle laughed. "This fellow certainly thought my fly was real." Uncle Scott netted the fish, removed the fly from his mouth, and let it swim away. Mark was amazed. "Why did you do that?" asked Mark. "Why didn't I kill the fish?" said Uncle. "I like to leave the river the way I found it. It's like cutting trees, Mark. You keep cutting trees, and soon you're going to have bald mountains." "Then why do you fish?" "Just for the fun of it," Uncle replied. "Besides, maybe one day I'll catch a mermaid. A wise old fisherman said that." "But mermaids aren't real," said Mark. "Aren't they?" Uncle smiled. Mayflies began to flit all around them, and rising trout made rings on the water. "The magic hour, my boy," said Uncle, climbing into the boat. "Do you remember how to roll cast?" "Yes, like this," Mark nodded, swinging his hand back and forth. "Well, this may be your lucky night." Uncle handed Mark the rod. Mark flushed with excitement. He raised the rod tip high, until the line hung behind his shoulder, just as his uncle had taught him. Then, with a quick chopping stroke, he whipped the rod downward. The line shot out, and a cream-colored fly drifted down on the slick water like a snowflake. Mark took a deep breath. "Fine cast," Uncle exclaimed. "Now keep your eye on the fly. Remember, you're not going to feel the strike. You're going to see it. When you see a fish take your fly, raise your rod. Easy does it, my boy. You don't want to break your line." Mark kept his eye on the fly, and suddenly the water swelled under it. Then a gaping mouth broke the surface, and the fly was gone. "Set the hook," Uncle shouted. Mark raised the rod, and the rod bent over from some heavy weight. The reel screeched as the line ran out. A large trout leapt in the air.